Samuel Carter was a man who moved like the desert wind, quiet, steady, and never staying in one place for too long. He spent most of his days traveling across the wide Arizona territory, guiding his horse through long stretches of open land where the sky felt endless, and the silence held its own kind of story. Samuel had learned to appreciate silence. Not everyone liked it, but for him, silence was a friend. He had known busy towns, noisy saloons, and crowded marketplaces, and he understood how easily noise could fill a person's head until they felt more tired than before. So when he chose the open desert over a city street, he did not feel like a man running away. He felt like a man finally breathing. He was not old, though the sun and dust had given his skin a rough look. His hair was a deep shade of brown, sun-faded at the ends, and his eyes were steady, watchful, the kind that paid attention to details others ignored. People often thought he was serious or strict, but in truth, Samuel simply spoke little because he believed words mattered. The fewer he used, the more weight they carried. Most of the people he met during his travels did not know his history, and Samuel preferred it that way. He had once lived near a small farming town, working with his father and younger brother. Life had been simple then, feeding livestock, repairing wooden fences, helping neighbors during harvest season. There had been laughter around the dinner table and warm evenings when the family sat outside watching the stars. Samuel used to think that life would continue forever. He thought he would grow old on that same land. But life changed, as it often does, quietly at first and then all at once. His family no longer lived on that land, and Samuel no longer had a place that felt like home. The memories were still soft and warm, but they were also painful to touch for too long, like holding something beautiful that could still hurt. So Samuel learned to move forward, not because he wanted to leave the past behind completely, but because he knew the heart can only carry so much before it needs to rest. The desert gave him that rest. During the day, sunlight rolled across sand and stone in shining waves. At night, the stars gathered like distant campfires, calm and eternal. Samuel slept under those stars more often than he slept under any roof. His horse, a calm chestnut mare named Willow, was his closest companion. She had a strong step and a gentle spirit. Samuel would often talk to her when the world felt too quiet. He did not expect her to answer. It was enough that she listened. One warm afternoon, Samuel rode toward a small settlement near the edge of Apache lands. He had heard there might be work there, repairing barns or helping with cattle drives. Work was how Samuel kept going. The tasks kept his hands steady, and steady hands helped keep the mind from drifting into old memories. Willow walked slowly, her hooves making soft prints in the sandy earth. A light breeze moved across the land, carrying the soft smell of sagebrush and distant wildflowers. Though Samuel did not speak much, he paid attention to the world around him in a way that made others believe he knew more than he said. He noticed how the birds flew low when a storm was far off, how the desert flowers opened in the early morning before the sun grew too hot, and how the land itself seemed to shift in color throughout the day. The desert was not empty to him. It was alive, patient, and strong. As Samuel traveled, he sometimes passed near Apache villages. He did so with respect, never entering their land without reason and never behaving as though he owned more right to the land than they did. Samuel believed every person deserved to live with dignity. He had met people from many cultures during his travels, and he found that kindness was the one language everyone could understand. When he met Apache hunters while riding, he would lift his hand in greeting. Sometimes they returned the gesture. Sometimes they watched him quietly. Samuel never felt uneasy about it. He understood that people protected what was theirs. He respected that deeply. The stories he heard from settlers, however, were often different. Many spoke with fear or misunderstanding or impatience. They told tales of conflict, of disagreements, of differences they did not take the time to understand. Samuel would listen quietly, but he did not repeat their words. He did not believe a single story ever represented a whole people. He believed that every person had their own story, their own heart, their own reasons. One evening, Samuel stopped near a shallow riverbed that was slowly drying under the summer heat. The sun had begun to sink behind distant mountains, and the sky had turned shades of gold and soft rose. Samuel dismounted, letting Willow drink from what little water remained. He knelt beside her and ran his hand along her neck. The air was warm but peaceful. He gathered a few dry branches and lit a small fire. The flames flickered gently, casting a soft glow across the sand. Samuel ate a simple meal, dried meat, cornbread, and a bit of sweet cactus fruit he had gathered earlier in the day. As he ate, he thought about the settlement he was heading toward. He wondered whether he would find work there, whether the people would be friendly, and how long he might stay before moving on again. He never planned far ahead. He had learned that life rarely followed plans. Above him, stars began to appear one by one until the sky was full. Samuel leaned back, resting against his saddle, and let his gaze drift upward. He traced shapes in the constellations the way he had as a boy. The stars never changed. They were constant no matter how the world below shifted. That brought him comfort. Some nights, when the silence grew deep, he would remember the sound of his mother humming as she cooked dinner. He would remember his father's steady laugh, rich like warm cornbread. He would remember how his younger brother used to race him across the fields shouting with joy. These memories felt like soft light in his chest. They were not something he wished to forget. They reminded him of love, of belonging, of everything good the world could offer. Even if the past was gone, the love from it still lived inside him. It shaped him, guided him, and made him careful with the hearts of others. The next morning, Samuel woke before sunrise. The world was quiet, still holding its breath in the moment between night and day. He saddled Willow and began riding again. The land slowly brightened around him, warmed by the first soft rays of light. He felt calm, steady, and ready for whatever lay ahead. As he continued his journey, Samuel had no idea that his life was about to change. He did not know that the road he traveled would soon lead him to someone who would touch his heart more deeply than he had ever expected. He did not know that a single meeting, born not out of plan but out of fate, would shape his thoughts, his dreams, and his memories for the rest of his life. All he knew was the quiet rhythm of the journey, the calm breath of his horse, and the gentle whisper of the wind. Samuel continued traveling that morning with the same steady pace he always kept. The sun rose slowly, coloring the sky in shades of pale peach and gold. The land around him was wide and open, but not empty. There were tall grasses in some places and clusters of cactus standing like quiet guards of the desert. The air felt warm, the way it does before the day fully wakes up. Willow walked calmly, her ears turning sometimes at small sounds in the distance. Samuel had learned to trust her instincts. Horses notice things before humans do, so when Willow suddenly slowed her steps and lifted her head, Samuel gently pulled the reins and looked around too. At first he did not see anything unusual. The land seemed peaceful. The breeze moved softly, but Willow kept watching toward a clump of large rocks near a dried riverbank. Samuel dismounted quietly. He did not expect danger, but he had lived long enough to respect caution. He tied Willow loosely so she could move if needed. His boots touched the ground softly as he walked closer to the rocks. He listened carefully. The desert had many sounds, wind brushing over stones, insects humming, distant birds calling. But amid those sounds, Samuel noticed something else. A very soft sound, almost like someone trying not to cry. He paused, waiting, listening. There it was again. A quiet, trembling breath. Samuel's voice was calm when he spoke. "Hello, I mean no harm." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a slight rustle. Someone was there. Samuel took another slow step closer, then stopped. He knew trust was something that must not be rushed. A moment later, a young woman appeared from behind the rocks. She moved carefully, as though unsure whether she should approach or run. Her clothes were woven from natural fibers, beautifully made, marked with colors and patterns that Samuel recognized as Apache. Her long black hair fell loose around her shoulders, and her dark eyes held both fear and strength at the same time. She looked tired, as if she had been walking for a long time without rest. Samuel stayed still, not wanting to frighten her. His voice remained gentle. "Are you injured?" The woman shook her head, though her expression showed she was overwhelmed. She seemed to be searching for words, maybe trying to decide whether she could trust him. Samuel waited patiently, not asking again, not stepping closer. He had learned that patience often spoke louder than explanations. After a quiet moment, the woman lifted her hand slowly and placed it over her heart, then lightly touched her forehead. It was a gesture of greeting in her culture. Samuel lowered his head in respect. He did not speak her language fluently, but he knew enough to show understanding. She spoke then, softly, her voice like a gentle stream. Her name was Ayanna. Samuel understood her name clearly, though many of her other words were unfamiliar. She pointed toward the distance, the direction she had come from, and her brows lowered with worry. Samuel realized she had been traveling alone, and perhaps for longer than she should have. He offered her water by slowly placing his canteen on the ground between them. He did not hand it directly to her because he wanted her to feel comfortable choosing to take it. After a moment, Ayanna stepped forward and picked it up. She drank slowly, carefully, and then smiled faintly in thanks. It was a small smile, but it felt meaningful. Samuel motioned to the fire pit he could quickly build, offering warmth and rest. Ayanna hesitated, then finally nodded. He gathered a few dry branches, and soon a soft flame flickered between them. Ayanna sat near it, her hands extended toward the warmth, though the morning was not cold. It was more that she needed the comfort of something steady. Samuel sat a short distance away, giving her space. They stayed like that for a while. No rushing, no questions she was not ready to answer. Only peace. Slowly, Ayanna began to speak again. Her sentences were brief, and Samuel listened carefully. She explained that she belonged to a nearby Apache community, and that she had been on her way back to her people. She had been separated from them unexpectedly, and had become unsure of the path. She did not say much more, but Samuel understood that her journey had been stressful and lonely. He looked at the sun, reading its direction. He knew the land well enough to guide her. Though their languages were different, he used simple words, gestures, and drawings in the sand to tell her he could help her return safely. Ayanna looked at him for a long moment. Her expression changed in a way that Samuel could not quite describe. It was as if she was searching his face, trying to understand who he truly was, not just a traveler, not just a stranger, but a man who chose kindness when he did not have to. Finally, she nodded. They traveled together slowly. Ayanna walked beside Willow while Samuel led. The path was gentle. The day grew warm but not uncomfortable. As they walked, Samuel and Ayanna shared words when they could. Sometimes their words did not match, but their meaning did. They pointed at plants and gave them names. They spoke of the sky, the river, the birds. Sometimes they walked in silence, but it was not a heavy silence. It felt natural, like two songs blending softly. Ayanna had a warm laugh, quiet but bright, like sunlight dancing on water. She laughed when Samuel mispronounced a word in her language, and Samuel found himself smiling in return without thinking. He did not remember the last time he had smiled so naturally. The more they traveled, the more Samuel noticed gentle details about her. The way she listened to the wind as if it were an old friend, the way she touched the leaves of small plants with care, the way her eyes softened when she looked at the distant horizon, as though the world held stories she had always known. Ayanna too learned things about Samuel without needing many words. She saw the patience in his movements. She saw the quiet strength in his silence. She noticed that when he looked at the land, he looked with respect, not hunger or claim. Their worlds were different, yet something between them felt familiar, like two hearts remembering something they had once known. By late afternoon, they reached a rise in the land where the wind moved gently over the grass. They paused there, standing side by side. Ayanna looked toward the distant hills where her village would be. Samuel could see the relief in her eyes, yet also something else, something softer, more complicated. He felt it too. A quiet closeness. The desert around them was peaceful, warm, and wide. Nothing rushed them. No one hurried their thoughts. They stood together in that stillness, two travelers whose paths were never meant to cross, yet had crossed in exactly the way life sometimes surprises us. Neither of them knew what would happen next, or how brief or lasting their time together would be. They only knew that in this moment a connection was forming, a silent understanding, gentle and deep, the kind that does not need to be spoken to be real. Samuel and Ayanna continued walking side by side as the sun rose higher, spreading warm light across the desert floor. Their steps were slow and steady, neither of them in a hurry. The land stretched wide before them, beautiful in its quiet way. A soft breeze moved across the grass, and both of them felt calm in its presence. There was no need for many words. The silence between them felt gentle, not heavy. Ayanna seemed more relaxed now than when Samuel had first found her. Her shoulders were no longer tense, and the worry in her eyes had softened. Still, from time to time, Samuel saw her glance toward the distant hills, perhaps wondering about her people or the situation waiting for her when she returned. He did not ask her questions about it. He knew that stories come out when they are ready, not when someone pushes. Around midday, they rested beneath the shade of a large mesquite tree. Willow grazed on dry grass, flicking her tail lightly in the warm air. Samuel shared his food with Ayanna. She accepted only a small amount at first, polite and reserved. Samuel smiled and encouraged her gently, and soon she took a little more. They ate quietly, but the quiet was filled with understanding. Every movement was simple, calm, and unforced. After they finished eating, Ayanna picked up a smooth, flat stone and began drawing in the soft sand. She drew a line of tall mountains, then a river flowing between them. Her hands moved carefully, her fingers tracing gentle shapes. Samuel watched her, curious. When she finished, she tapped her chest softly and then pointed toward the drawing. Samuel nodded. It was her home. She brushed the sand smooth again and drew a circle surrounded by small marks. Then she looked up at him, waiting to see if he understood. Samuel thought for a moment. Then he pointed to the small marks and spread his hand out like a group of people. Ayanna smiled. Yes, the marks were homes, a community, her family. Samuel then took another small stick and drew a little shape far from the village. It was simple and unclear, but Ayanna recognized it. It represented him. He then drew a long line between the two shapes. The message was clear. Though he walked near her world, he did not live in it. Ayanna looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was gentle, thoughtful. She understood. Their worlds were close and far at the same time. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with small exchanges that needed no explanation. When they began walking again, the land around them began to change. There were more trees now, more birds, more signs of life. The air itself felt different. They were nearing her people's territory. Samuel noticed that Ayanna's steps slowed slightly. He understood that she felt a mix of emotions. Returning home meant safety, but it also meant returning to responsibilities, expectations, and paths already shaped before she had met him. She looked at him with eyes that spoke more than words. Samuel nodded softly. He did not speak, but he understood. As they walked, Ayanna began to hum softly. It was a gentle sound, like the whisper of water over smooth stone. Samuel listened quietly. The melody carried warmth, memory, and something tender. It felt like a song that belonged to the land itself. He wished he could understand the words, but even without them, the song touched him deeply. Ayanna noticed him listening, and her voice grew just a little stronger. Every note felt like a piece of her heart being shared. When the song ended, Samuel felt something inside him settle, like a quiet truth had been placed gently in his chest. Later in the day, the two reached a small rise that overlooked a wide valley. Ayanna paused. Her expression became thoughtful again. She pointed down toward the valley where her community would be. Smoke from fires rose gently into the air, and Samuel could faintly see the shapes of homes and people moving below. This was the end of their shared path. Ayanna stood still, her eyes focused on her village, but her heart seemed to linger on the journey they had taken together. Samuel watched her, giving her space to gather her thoughts. Willow stood quietly beside them as though she too understood the importance of this moment. Ayanna turned to face Samuel fully now. Her hands moved slowly, expressing thought rather than speech. She touched her heart, then lightly touched her forehead, a gesture of deep respect and gratitude. Samuel returned the gesture with sincerity. She then reached toward the small bag tied at her waist. Slowly, she opened it and removed a small object wrapped in soft cloth. She held it carefully, as though it carried meaning beyond words. When she unwrapped it, Samuel saw a small woven charm made from desert grass and tiny polished shells. The shells glowed softly in the sunlight. It was simple but filled with care. Ayanna placed the charm in Samuel's hand. Her fingers rested on his for a moment longer than necessary. In that touch was every unspoken word. Thank you. I trust you. I remember you. Samuel looked down at the charm with quiet reverence. He sensed that this was not just a gift. It was a piece of her spirit, given as something to carry with him through the rest of his journey. He closed his fingers around it gently, promising in silence to honor it. Ayanna smiled. It was a soft smile, touched with sadness and warmth at the same time. Samuel felt his breath catch slightly. There were no words that could express everything he felt in that moment. He simply stood there, steady, present, open. Ayanna then stepped back, returning to her path. She walked a few steps toward the valley, then paused and looked over her shoulder. Her eyes met Samuel's once more. Nothing needed to be said. The moment held its own language. Samuel lifted his hand in a quiet farewell, his expression calm but full of feeling. Ayanna returned the gesture, and then continued down the hill toward her people, her steps graceful and sure. Samuel watched until she disappeared among the trees and small homes below. Only then did he let out a slow breath. The world around him felt both familiar and changed. He had traveled across the desert many times, but this journey felt different. He felt something in his chest now that had not been there before. Something steady, warm, and a little bittersweet. He looked down at the charm in his hand. The shells shimmered softly. He tied it carefully to his saddle where it would remain close. Then, with gentle movements, Samuel mounted Willow again. He did not rush. He did not look back. He began to ride forward, not toward the valley, but toward the open plains ahead. He did not know what the future would bring. He only knew that something important had passed between them. Something honest, something human, and the memory of that connection would travel with him wherever the road led next. Samuel traveled for some time after leaving the valley, but his thoughts stayed behind with Ayanna. The land stretched ahead of him as it always had, but it felt different now. The soft charm tied to his saddle swayed gently with every step Willow took. Each movement reminded Samuel of the quiet kindness and gentle strength he had seen in Ayanna's eyes. He did not look back, yet every part of him felt as though some invisible thread now connected him to a world he had only glimpsed. Meanwhile, Ayanna walked down the hill toward her village. Her steps were slow at first, as though her heart needed time to catch up to what her feet were doing. She knew that once she reached her community, everything would continue just as it had been planned. There were expectations waiting for her, responsibilities she had known about all her life. She was to be part of a union between two respected families, a commitment meant to bring peace and unity. She had accepted this path long before she ever met Samuel, yet now something inside her felt changed. When she entered the village, her people greeted her warmly. They had worried about her absence, and relief filled their expressions. The older women guided her toward a shaded place where she could rest and drink fresh water. They asked gently where she had been, and she told them only that she had found her way back with help from a traveler. She spoke softly, carefully choosing words that kept peace while still honoring the truth. There was no need to explain everything. Some memories lived best in the heart. As she sat near the shade, she looked around at the familiar faces, the houses made of wood and earth, the children playing with laughter ringing in the air. This was her world, the world she loved, yet it felt changed simply because she now looked at it with new eyes. She felt both belonging and distance at the same time. Ayanna knew that soon she would be asked to stand beside the man she was promised to. His name was Kalen. He was respected in the village, thoughtful and loyal, known for his commitment to his family and his people. He had always treated Ayanna with respect. She did not dislike him. She simply did not feel the connection with him that she had begun to feel with Samuel. It was not something she could explain with words. It was something that had grown without being asked, gentle as a seed finding soil in the wind. That evening, the village gathered for a small celebration to welcome Ayanna back. The air smelled of cooked corn and sweet herbs. Drums sounded softly, steady as a heartbeat. People sat near the fires, talking and laughing. Ayanna joined them, though her thoughts drifted like clouds. Kalen sat near her. His presence was calm, like a stone holding stillness in a river. He looked at her with quiet concern. "You seem thoughtful," he said gently, his voice warm. Ayanna smiled with kindness. "I am grateful to be home." Kalen nodded. "We all are. You were missed." There was sincerity in his words. His eyes showed care but not ownership. He watched her carefully as though he sensed something had shifted but did not yet understand what. Ayanna wanted to honor her people, her family, and the promise made for unity. Yet her heart felt as though it had opened a door she had not known existed, and behind that door was a feeling that still lingered quietly, soft but strong. She spoke to Kalen with honesty. "There is something I am thinking about," she said slowly. "Something I do not yet know how to name." Kalen listened. He did not question her quickly. He respected silence the same way Samuel did. "When you are ready to speak of it, I will listen," he said. His patience surprised her. It gave her comfort, though it did not change the truth inside her heart. That night, while her village slept, Ayana stepped outside her home and stood beneath the moonlight. The sky above her glittered with stars, endless and gentle. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the night air fill her senses. She thought about Samuel, his quiet strength, the steady way he moved, the way he listened, the way he smiled only when the world invited it. She placed her hand lightly over her heart and whispered his name softly, not to call him, but to remember him. At that same moment, far across the desert, Samuel also sat beneath the stars. The charm Ayana had given him rested in his hand. He held it carefully, as though it were the most fragile and important thing he owned. He did not speak aloud, but his thoughts were full of her. He remembered her laughter, the softness of her gestures, the way her eyes held both courage and kindness. The distance between them was large, yet it felt like they were looking at the same sky. Days passed. Samuel found work repairing fences and helping with traveling cattle drives. His hands stayed busy, but his heart carried a quiet ache. Not painful, just present, as though something precious had been left behind, not lost but unreachable. He did not try to force himself to forget. He honored the memory by carrying it with calm acceptance. Back in the village, preparations for Ayana's joining ceremony gently continued. Her mother wove new patterns onto a garment she would wear. Her elders spoke blessings of unity and peace. Ayana accepted these gestures with respect, yet something inside her still held the memory of the journey through the desert. The shared smiles, the still moments, the silent understanding. One afternoon, she sat beside a stream near the village. The water glittered in the sunlight, moving lightly over smooth stones. She reached into her woven bag and removed a small piece of cloth. Inside it was a single strand of horsehair she had collected from Willow before they parted. She had kept it close ever since. She tied the strand gently into the braid at the end of her hair. It rested there, small and delicate. It reminded her that some connections do not disappear, even when distance comes between two people. Some connections live quietly within the heart, shaping it with kindness instead of sorrow. She understood now that love did not always mean possession or staying. Sometimes love meant gratitude for the part someone played in your journey. Sometimes love meant remembering without holding tightly. Ayana stood and let the sunlight warm her face. She breathed deeply, allowing everything she felt to settle softly within her. She did not need to fight her path. She could honor her duties with sincerity, while still keeping the memory of Samuel as a quiet light inside her spirit. Samuel, too, understood this in his own way. As he continued traveling, he realized that meeting Ayana had reminded him of something important, that his heart was still capable of feeling deeply, gently, honestly. The memory of her became a kind of guiding warmth. Neither of them tried to erase the memory. Neither tried to rewrite their fate. They simply carried the truth with them, a truth that love can exist even when two lives do not walk the same road, a truth that some hearts meet only for a moment, yet that moment lasts forever inside them. Their connection did not vanish, it simply changed shape. It became something quiet, something soft, something eternal. Samuel continued his travels, moving from one small town to another, offering help wherever it was needed. He repaired roofs, carried supplies, tended horses, and mended wooden fences that had been worn by time and weather. The people he met often wondered about him. They sensed something gentle about his presence, as if he carried a story he did not speak. And though they sometimes asked where he came from or where he was going, Samuel always answered with a soft, simple smile, the kind that said his path was his own, and he was content to follow it quietly. The charm Ayana had given him never left his side. He tied it carefully to the inside of his saddle strap, where it would not be damaged by the wind or sun. Some days, when the world around him grew quiet, he would touch it softly with his fingertips. He did not do this with sadness or longing. He did it the way one touches something precious that has shaped the heart. The memory of Ayana had settled into him gently, like a warm ember that glowed without burning. Samuel's life continued in movement. He learned new places, saw new rivers, rode through valleys filled with wildflowers in springtime, and crossed plains that rolled like golden waves under the summer sun. Yet no matter where he went, the sky above him always felt familiar. He often looked up at it at night, remembering the way Ayana had stood under the stars, her presence quiet and steady. He sometimes wondered where she was at that very moment, whether she too looked at the same sky. And even though they were far apart, he felt close to her in those moments. It was as if the sky cared for both of them and kept them gently connected. Meanwhile, Ayana remained in her village, continuing her life among her people. She helped gather herbs, prepared meals with her mother, and carried water from the stream. She walked the familiar paths she had known since childhood, now seeing them with a deeper understanding. She was part of a community that valued harmony, tradition, and unity, and she cherished that deeply. Her days were full of work, laughter of children, and songs shared during evening gatherings. Yet within her heart was a quiet place where Samuel still lived peacefully. Her joining ceremony took place in the late summer. It was a calm and respectful occasion, filled with blessings and gentle words. Ayana and Kaylin stood side by side before their families. Her heart was steady and clear. She did not feel forced or lost. She understood that the paths of life sometimes move like rivers, curving naturally, not always ending where one expects, but always flowing onward. She and Kaylin shared mutual respect, friendship, and trust. These were important foundations, and Ayana honored them. Kaylin looked at her with warmth and sincerity. He did not try to claim her heart completely. He understood that love can grow slowly, like a seed planted deep in the earth. He also understood that some memories cannot be removed, nor should they be. He did not ask her to forget anything. He simply offered steadiness, presence, and companionship, and Ayana accepted that with grace. Still, sometimes she walked to the quiet place where the land opened toward the distant horizon, and she would stand there with her hand resting lightly over the braided strand of horsehair in her hair. She did not speak Samuel's name aloud anymore. She did not need to. Love that is real does not fade with silence. It simply changes into something gentle, something that lives in the spirit like soft light. Time continued as it always does. Seasons changed. The air grew cool, then warm again. Grass grew tall, then lay golden in the wind. Samuel grew older. He did not change sharply or suddenly, but slowly. In the quiet way of someone who has lived with awareness of the world, the lines on his face deepened, not from worry, but from years spent under open skies. His movements remained steady, strong, and thoughtful. People respected him not for any great fame or loud deeds, but for the calm goodness in him. One day, Samuel reached a place where mountains rose tall and the wind carried the scent of pine trees. He decided to rest there for a while. He built a small shelter near a clear lake, where willow could graze freely and the nights were cool and star-filled. He found comfort in the rhythm of the land, the sound of water, the whisper of leaves, the calls of distant birds. Sometimes travelers passed through and stayed to share a meal with him. They would talk about their journeys, their families, their dreams. Samuel listened kindly, offering wisdom when asked for it, never pushing his own thoughts into others. He had learned that true understanding comes from listening more than speaking. Every now and then, someone would ask if he had ever been in love. Samuel would pause. His eyes would soften with the kind of warmth that does not belong to sadness. He would smile, a quiet smile full of memory, and say only, "Yes," once, and it was enough. He never explained more. He did not need to. The love he carried was not a story to be told. It was something to be lived quietly within. Years passed in steady peace. Far away, Ayana lived her life with grace. She became a person her community looked to for calm wisdom. She offered help to others, listened to their worries, and guided them with the same gentle patience she had once shown Samuel. She and Kaylin built a life of mutual trust, respect, and understanding. Though romantic love did not spark quickly between them, it grew slowly, softly, like a flower blooming at its own pace. She cared for him and he cared for her. They shared laughter and challenges. They walked side by side through the seasons of their lives. Yet in her heart the memory of Samuel remained, not as a heartbreak, not as longing, but as something pure, beautiful, and unbroken. The memory reminded her of the importance of kindness, of gentle connection, of the way two souls can meet and recognize something meaningful without needing to hold or possess it. One evening, when the sky glowed in shades of rose and gold, Ayana stood at the edge of the valley. She placed her hand over her heart and closed her eyes. She felt peace, deep, full, and steady. At that same moment, far across the land, Samuel sat by the lake, the charm from Ayana resting in his hands. The evening light reflected softly in the water. He lifted his gaze to the sky and felt the same peace. They did not see each other again. They did not need to. Their connection lived in the silent spaces of memory, in the gentle parts of the spirit where love settles when it has taught what it came to teach. Samuel's heart was quieter now, but not empty. Ayana's heart was fuller now, but not burdened. Their paths had crossed for only a short while, yet those moments shaped the rest of their lives. Some love stories do not end with two people together. Some love stories end with two hearts growing in different places, carrying the memory of one another as something sacred and warm. Some love is not meant to be lived side by side. Some love is meant to be remembered forever. And that kind of love never fades.